I thought tonight I would talk about the teacher-student relationship. And the reason I want to do that is often teachers can't, within a Sangha, can't do that kind of talk for their students because it's kind of awkward. So I have the advantage of not having relations with anybody in your community aside from Mike. And so I can kind of get away with it and say some things that maybe couldn't be said otherwise. And essentially, these are my opinions. They're informed to some degree, but of course, they're just opinions. So I invite you to hold them like that. What I want to talk about is the human teacher principle. So a lot can be said about how life is a teacher and how there's just the transcendent function of the teacher in the universe. But I want to talk about working with a humanoid mammal as a student. So I'll talk about mostly how to be a student, but also how to understand what a Zen teacher is. Um, Part of my background is now being on both sides as a student and a teacher. So I've been teaching in various capacities for about 10 years. And I studied with my root teachers, Chosen and Hogen Bays, who are white plum teachers. I've studied with them for, I guess, 17 years, 18 years now. I also have some experience with Shoto Harada Roshi. I've done some training with him. The reason I mention that is because he is the closest thing I've ever had to a traditional Zen master, a traditional relationship with a Japanese Roshi. And then I've had other teachers who have been really important to me, like Keith Dowman is a Dzogchen teacher, somebody dear to my heart, and Antaro Ali, who's a theater teacher. So teachers have different styles, and I'm bringing this synthesis of different teachers to this talk. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that the teacher-student relationship is different for everyone. You cannot look at it as some cookie cutter thing that you're going to repeat. Or you cannot think because Bob has such a relationship with the teacher, I too am going to have that relationship. It really isn't like that. And here are some reasons why. First of all, everybody has different needs, and the teacher is responding to those different needs. Some people need the teacher to put on their soft energy and just be a tender teddy bear and really absorb and listen and encourage. And some people really need a lion. Some people need a tiger because they're so stubborn. The teacher's got to really bring on the energy in order to get through. We bring to the teacher-student relationship different desires for our Dharma practice. So one of the things I ask when I'm first starting to work with a student in Dokusan, in Sanzen, is I ask them, what do you want from this? Not from me necessarily, but what do you want from the Dharma? Often people think this is a question they shouldn't ask, right? We're not supposed to want anything from the Dharma. Didn't Dogen Zenji said, practice the way for the sake of the way, etc. But the truth is, we do want something. We are motivated by a desire, and it's different for everybody. So you may think the teacher wants you to say, I'm interested in awakening. I want to see through the self. From my point of view, I want to hear what's genuinely in the student's heart. And sometimes that's emotional growth. They want to develop loving kindness. Sometimes somebody really just wants to learn to regulate their nervous system. And that's why they're sitting zazen. They want to be calm. Some people are coming to the Sangha, coming to the teacher-student relationship simply for a desire for belonging or a relationship with a person who is trustworthy. So the desire that you are bringing, the teacher is reading and responding to. We also bring different expectations. And so here's a little experiment. In your own mind, fill in this blank. A Zen teacher is, what pops to mind for you? Just notice that. How about this? A Zen teacher is not, what pops to mind? A Buddhist teacher should be, etc. So often these kinds of expectations are actually hidden from us until we start working with the teacher. And at a certain point, our expectations and the reality of who they are get into conflict. And thankfully, that's a mirror so we can see those. Related to that is we bring projections. We bring both kind of negative and golden shadows to the picture. We can't see a lot of things in ourselves, and so both the positive and the negative often goes on to the teacher. Unless you're someone who's done, let's say, 40 years of therapy and Zen practice, there's basically no chance you don't bring projections into a relationship like a teacher-student relationship. Basically no chance. But that's what we're working with. We are coming to the teacher partially so we can be reflected and we can reflect them to themselves. So we bring projections, we bring different parental patterning and wounding. If you've been around a Sangha or any spiritual community long enough, you know that the basic family template that we had comes into the community. And depending on how that community is structured, especially if it has a hierarchy, especially if there's a man and a woman who are co-leading the Sangha, all of the parental stuff comes, right? We would so love to think that, well, I'm 52 years old. I don't have any daddy issues. Maybe that's the case. But but often with any authority figure, all that stuff is coming with us and is in the mix. You're bringing a different life experience maturity to the relationship. The teacher is responding to that. You're bringing a different emotional maturity. You're bringing a different psychological maturity. Some people have done a lot of work on themselves and really understand their mind in a relative sense before they come into Dokusan or Sanzen. And some people don't. We're bringing different spiritual maturity. So the depth that we have is equal to the teacher that we can see and that we get, right? You only see as much depth as you are looking from. So one of the ways this plays out is on one side, when we are in a more naive stage of practice, we're projecting a lot and we just see often a spiritual superhero, right? We're putting a lot onto this person, a lot of expectations onto the robe. But if we have, on the other hand, a lot of experience in practice, have had our own deep insights, then what can flow between us and the teacher is on a whole nother level, right? So Sally is coming at Assange and being like, he's just telling me to follow my breath. And Jane comes out and they had a profound, intimate meeting of minds. And that's because they're different people. So because of these factors, there is not one Shishin Roshi. You may in your Sangha talk about Shishin Roshi and assume you're talking about the same being, but we all live in a world of our own awareness, essentially. And you have your own version of every single person. Related to that is there is not one way the teacher-student relationship should unfold, nor is there only one possibility for its unfolding. Now, I don't know the setup in your Sangha and as far as availability of teacher and how that is structured. But in my Sangha, the actual structure of the relationship depends on a lot of things. Of course, the teacher's availability. And often a full-time ordained teacher has more time for their students than a lay teacher. But primarily, it depends on what the people themselves are bringing. So people have a different level of commitment to the practice. A teacher is going to meet somebody who demonstrates a deep commitment to Buddha Dharma differently in some way than someone who has a kind of weekend warrior kind of thing going on. We may have a different relationship to the relationship, right? I've said a lot about that. Some people really want um, to disciple themselves, and some people just want someone to encourage them, and everything in between. We are each bringing a different receptivity to being taught. In a way, until we really know the depth of our own nature, there's some closure. We can't fully accept what comes towards us because ego defenses always get in the way. For example, how often are you listening to a Dharma talk like this one, or in Sanzen or Dokusan, and there's part of your mind that's already arguing, part of your mind that's already saying, yes, but, well, actually, I heard it differently. I watched a YouTube video, right? Even no matter how mature we are, that rebellious part of us, the ego really often doesn't like to receive new information or be challenged in any way. So we're going into Sanzen, and the degree to which we can actually have a free flow of energy varies greatly, and it depends on our own practice. We have a different relationship to being challenged. I remember I did this myself in the monastery and seeing other people go to the teachers and say, I really want you to stick it to me. I really want you to be hard on me. I want to be trained like they were trained in the old days, right? There's this kind of fiery passion that comes up. And most of the time, the people, one part of somebody says that, and the rest of them is not really on board. Because as soon as they really do get challenged, it's not so comfortable. Really putting ourselves in a situation of Zen training will mean most of the time some kind of deep pain and confrontation with who we think we are. And so I've mentioned all of these factors that shape what the relationship is and what the teacher is that you're going to get, but all of this is in motion. The teacher-student relationship is always changing. First of all, you're changing if you practice. So what you can see and who you be is different. So the teacher is responding to that differently. The teacher is changing. Hopefully, any teacher who wouldn't say they're not learning from their students and that they are not in a way having sanzen at the same time as you is probably not somebody I would study with. Meaning, teachers are always learning. You know, the famous quote from Dogen Zenji, my life was one continuous mistake. Always learning. So the teacher is changing. The teacher is changing, you're changing, the relationship changes. Related to that, you showing up as a student is teaching the teacher how to be a teacher. This is important to understand. And sometimes in hierarchical situations, it's kind of set up where there's this, it's almost an energetic dynamic. There's this being who knows something that we don't know, and we're just there to receive it. But it is an act of generosity for us to be a student because we are letting the teacher learn. When you become a teacher, teaching becomes a deep part of your practice. So it should be understand that this is reciprocal. It's interesting. It's in one hand, it's very distinct, teacher and student, host and guest, right? But on another level, it's not so clear. It's all mixed together. So if you are working with a teacher, or if you're considering working with a teacher, and if you're engaging that in whatever way, I invite you to just be curious and honest. What do I want from this relationship? And what do I think it's about? I want to shift a little bit just because of time and offer you some metaphors and images for the function of the teacher. Now, Every teacher is different. Some teachers will embody all of these things I'm going to mention at one time or another, meaning their practice has the depth and flexibility that they can, we say in the monastery, turn on a dime. They have a deep flexibility of being. Some teachers have only one of these ways of going about things. And that's neither good nor bad. It's just the way it is. So I want to offer you these images. The first is the teacher is a midwife. And they're simply assisting your practice as it is unfolding. So this awakening thing is being activated by your meditation and your study and your self-reflection, and the teacher is helping it along. There's positive encouragement. There is some feedback. They're not there to take away the pain of the process, but they might help you make less pain with your own mind. They might help you be in the transformative current with less difficulty. So the teacher just assists your process, midwifing. Another function of the teacher is as a mirror. So essentially, they're providing awareness and a reflection of how you're showing up. They're helping you see what you can't yet see. We have to have some faith or direct experience, or both, that the teacher has a more encompassing clarity than we do. Because if we don't believe they have a more encompassing clarity, then we have no reason to believe or feel that they can see something about ourselves that we can't see. So in some way, we're at least acting as if, or we're taking a leap of faith that the teacher has a larger perspective, if only a little bit, than we do on our own practice. So we get reflections, and this can be simply how they show up in their life. The way they live their life is a teaching. You might be driving with a teacher, and you're complaining about how hot it is and begging for the air conditioning, and they're just calmly sweating. And right there, you're receiving a reflection of your state of mind as they receive that experience differently. The mirroring can be reflections arising out of discussions in Sanzen. And so, what you want and what you're ready to see and what's reflected are all interdependent. And as teachers, we get feedback about how much a student wants to hear about themselves. We read body language, we read energy, we read, do they not come back to Dokusan or Sanzen for 3 weeks? We're watching how much the student wants to be mirrored. Another image comes from Shantideva. I don't know if you're familiar with the way of the Bodhisattva, if that's part of what you teach over there. Okay, great. So this is one of the images he uses for a bodhisattva. He says the bodhisattva is a bridge or a boat. Bridge or a boat. So in this sense, the teacher's job, role, function is presenting the elements of the path in a skillful way for where you're at. They're presenting the elements of the path. So that could be through talks, it could be through personal instruction. And in this sense, their confidence in the practice may be what keeps you afloat as you sail the waves of doubt and discouragement, as of course, as well as those times that when we're smooth sailing and inspired in our practice. So you could say, in this sense, the teacher is functioning as a reliable transmission of faith. This person keeps showing up every week. They've been doing this for 40 years. They keep giving basically the same Dharma talk from a different angle. They're transmitting faith. They are showing us what it means to have confidence in the way. The last image, let's see, the second to last image I'll share with you, we can call a tower a mile high. And this is an image that comes from the koan texts. somewhat equivalent is the tiger's lair. In this, basically, the teacher is saying to you, no, not yet. You are still coming from ego, right? That's not it. Nope. That's not clarity. That's not the answer to the koan. That's not how you do shikantaza. Their job is to hold to an integrity of what they're looking for and what you need to see. Often it's only in koan practice that we get this kind of nope, keep working on it. Right? So in this sense, the teacher is often not super friendly. In my training in Japan, I found that the Roshi could sometimes be so mean it would sting for hours. I would just be kind of shocked about how ruthless he could be. But that no, you are still coming from ego, if we want to awaken, is something extremely precious. Somebody who has the integrity to be that direct with us is really rare in a life. Think about how many people in your life care about you enough and trust the relationship enough to really tell you where you are falling short, especially if they can be skillful about it. It's quite rare, I think. So a tower a mile high. In a sense, this style of teaching, when people are going through times of spiritual pride, for example, or someone has an awakening experience, if the teacher doesn't do this, that kind of stink of Zen won't be deflated. There's got to be some way that the teacher reflects that to us, or else we just won't see it. So, a tower a mile high. The last metaphor I want to, oh, excuse me, I actually have three more metaphors. Do I have time for them? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, go for it. Take your time.
Okay, okay, thank you. Okay. The next one I want to say is a shapeshifter or a saboteur. This has some similarity to the tower a mile high. The difference is, in this sense, the teacher is embodying and expressing the fruition of practice. What's the fruition of practice? One way to look at it is someone who is not stuck to roles, ways of being, or patterns of behavior. They don't have the same fixed ideas of how they should or shouldn't be that other people have. And especially around practice, we can tend to take on certain like Zen personalities. I don't know if you've seen that or gone through that. We can feel, okay, I'm a devoted practitioner, so I am now gonna unconsciously I become Mr. Tranquility. I'm always unruffled. And whenever you say hello to me, I say, I'm doing fine. I have my spiritual voice or whatever the version is. So the teacher cuts through that just by being who they are, not stuck to any idea of what Zen practice is. I can give you an example. Early in my training with Chozen Roshi, we were working in a dumpster, and it was quite disgusting in there. And it was during work practice, Samu, and I was kind of daintily like engaging with it half-heartedly. And Chosen was in her Samoe and she just dove with both feet into the dumpster and started moving into the garbage. That was one of those moments where I really saw that flexibility and I really saw myself because she demonstrated that kind of freedom. So the shapeshifter. And I think we recognize the quality of shapeshifter as we practice more and more, that we're able to flexibly move from person to person and something different comes forward and something appropriate comes forward. Right? We get a certain fluidity of how we manifest ourselves. The next image I call source of transmission. And in this, I don't mean like one day you practiced for long enough and the teacher gives you Dharma transmission. That may be part of this. What I mean in this sense is that the teacher is communicating the Dharma and an empowerment of your practice on an energetic level. Okay? There's a field effect. Some practitioners and teachers have this, some don't. One example of this is with my teacher, Keith Dowman. In the Vajrayana tradition, as you may know, there are different visualizations and more complicated practices than we have in most Zen lineages. When I'm with Keith, practicing with him, I can do these practices really, really well. And the visualizations are crisp, and I feel the effect, and everything becomes luminous. And then when I go home, it's much, much harder. Shoto Harada Roshi, there's an effect that most of his students recognize is that when he is um, at the monastery and running sesshin, especially, the energy is just crackling. There's so much vitality. He's able to carry the whole Sangha because his vow and his practice is so deep. But when he goes on vacation, it gets really hard to have the same level of energy and clarity. You could think of this pheromonally, even, right? If we are if our nervous system is agitated and we have stress hormones going off, that's in the air, and we feel that, right? If someone is deeply settled in themselves, right, they really are grounded in their tanden and their mind is crisp and clear, that's going to have an effect that we feel on a bodily and a nervous system level because we resonate together. So that's source of transmission. Last thing I'll mention is the craftsman or the master and the apprentice dynamic. Some of the things that happen when we engage with a teacher, and this may be true with a therapist or any other role like this, archetypal dynamics get sparked. And we're falling into these patterns of being that are so ancient that they just have a current to them. They animate us. In this kind of relationship, we are really presenting ourselves as material to be shaped by the teacher. And Dogen Zenji talks about this in I think it's Gakudo Yojinchu. He says the ideal Zen student is like a piece of wood that the teacher whittles away what needs to be whittled away. Probably in our time, in our culture, that's correct or the appropriate thing for few people. I would say for few people, is that the right thing? Sometimes the teacher is in the right place, the student's in the right place, the background of the student's there. It's appropriate to enter into that kind of relationship where we surrender. And we really kind of let the teacher point out what they need to point out, let them train us deeply. It's an energetic posture that makes something possible that is not otherwise possible. Okay? Some of that has to do with just receiving the lineage, being willing to learn all of the forms and take on the rituals. And when we demonstrate that commitment, the teacher is more likely to invest that kind of energy and time in us. So there's the craftsman or the craft woman, craftsperson dynamic that can happen, and maybe at times you move in and out of that dynamic with your teacher. So I think the teacher student relationship in Zen is unique. It's potent. With a qualified teacher, I think it's precious to engage it at the level that's appropriate and at the level that's available. And so I just wanted to kind of maybe clarify some of the dynamics so that if we choose to enter it, we can enter it with less obstruction than has to be there. Because inevitably, it'll be a hard thing at some point. So that's what I had on my mind to share with you.